Welcome back to Arts and Sci 1B03, Writing, Grammar and Stylistics. This is the second lecture in a series of 5 on grammar and stylistics. In this lecture, we'll talk about compound and complex sentences, coordinating and subordinating conjunctions, and the semicolon. We'll also talk about the use of the comma in these contexts. Coordinating conjunctions. Compound sentences are made up of 2 or more independent clauses. We use coordinating conjunctions to combine these independent clauses. Let's consider the following examples. Susan loves her trips to the mountains, but she does not get to go there often. The next example. Sylvia makes very little money, yet she always finds ways to make ends meet. Third example. Stevenson's romances are entertaining. They are full of exciting adventures. In the 3 examples you've seen, the coordinating conjunctions are but, yet, and the semicolon. The semicolon is often considered part of punctuation, but it also functions here as a conjunction. Notice as well the use of the comma with coordinating conjunctions. Let's take a look at another example. Consider these sentences. Susan loves her trips to the mountains, period. She does not get to go there often, period. For number 1, the 2 sentences that you see here are those that were combined on the previous slide. They are 2 completely independent clauses. Independent clauses contain a subject and a verb. Consider the second sentences. Sylvia makes very little money, period. She always finds ways to make ends meet, period. 2 complete sentences. Number 3. Stevenson's romances are entertaining, period. They are full of exciting adventures, period. Remember that compound sentences are made up of 2 or more independent clauses. To combine these, as we did on the previous slide, we need to add in a coordinating conjunction. And, but, yet, the semicolon. The following sentence have an implicit subject in the second clause. This happens when it is the same subject across clauses. Consider these examples. Susan loves her trips to the mountains, but not to the beach. Notice that there's no comma before but. We'll talk about why in just a moment. Consider the second example. Sylvia makes very little money, yet always finds ways to make ends meet. What's different about sentence 1 and 2 compared to the sentences that you've seen on the previous slides? In number 1, Susan loves her trips to the mountains, but what's implicit here is she does not love her trips to the beach. This is called ellipsis when we cut out a part of the sentence and it's implicit, meaning that the hearer understands the message, but it's not explicitly stated. In this case, but doesn't have a comma before it. For number 2, Sylvia makes very little money, yet always finds ways to make ends meet. If we were to say Sylvia makes very little money, yet she or Sylvia always finds ways to make ends meet, we'd have to put a comma before yet. But is the coordinating conjunction, and yet is the coordinating conjunction. And notice again that there's no comma. You'll notice that commas are everywhere. We will address these at different times in the course, but keep track of them as we go along. The same coordinating conjunctions we've just seen can also be used to link together nouns or noun phrases. In the examples below, there are not 2 clauses, but only 1. Consider the first example. Susan loves her trips to either the mountains or the beach. There's only one clause here because we only have one subject and one verb. Susan loves. In the second example, Sylvia makes many curtains and valances with her sewing machine. One subject, one verb. Sylvia makes. The coordinating conjunctions link together, in the first case, either or links together mountains or the beach. Notice there's no comma necessary here. In the second example, and links together many curtains and many valances, so no comma is required here either. The coordinating conjunctions are and, nor, neither nor, but, or either or, yet, and the semicolon. Let's talk a little bit more about the semicolon. You can use the semicolon between two independent clauses if the thoughts are related. Example 1. Man proposes, God disposes. 2. 7-year-old Alicia likes to see the snow arrive. Her parents dread it. The use of conjunctions should be intentional by the writer. It should lend to the meaning of your text. In example 2 on this page, the link is logical, but there is also a sense of urgency to the second clause because of the semicolon. Think of how the sentence would read with and instead of the semicolon. 7-year-old Alicia likes to see the snow arrive, and her parents dread it. It just doesn't have the same meaning. Let's talk a little bit more about the semicolon. You can also use a semicolon between items in a list if those items contain commas. Consider the examples below. The letters of complaint were sent to Frank Mitchell, editor of the local gazette, Assunta Di Pietro, the president of the board, Simon Wong, the executive secretary, Scott McKinnon, head of the finance committee, and the volunteers, Lydia, David, and Stephanie. Commas are truly everywhere. Keep track of them by highlighting them when you read for other courses too. More on semicolons and commas. Here you'll see two independent clauses plus a conjunctive adverb. You may ask, what is a conjunctive adverb? Conjunctive adverbs are words like consequently, nevertheless, however, hence, indeed, moreover, thereover, thus, as a result, accordingly, and many, many more. Consider the following examples and look at the punctuation used. Number 1. The rain poured down on the field. However, the fans stayed and the game continued. Number 2. Doris entered the room. Consequently, Bob left. Notice the conjunctive adverbs, however, and consequently. In this case, you must use commas. The comma follows the conjunctive adverb. Let's look at some more commas and conjunctive adverbs again. Remember, in this case, we have two independent clauses, or two sentences, plus a conjunctive adverb. Notice where we place the commas. The rain poured down on the field. However, the fans stayed, and the game continued. In the first example, we have two separate sentences. In the second sentence, the conjunctive adverb, however, is followed by a comma. The fans stayed, comma, because of the coordinating conjunction and. In the second clause of the fans stayed and the game continued, the game is a separate subject from the fans. Therefore, we must use a comma here. Let's consider another restyling of the sentence. The fans stayed and the game continued, however. Notice the use of commas. Example 2. Doris entered the room. Consequently, Bob left. If we want to combine these sentences, we could say, Doris entered the room, comma, and consequently, Bob left. Notice again the placement of the commas. The reason why we have a comma after room is because Doris and Bob are separate subjects. Then, with the use of consequently, a conjunctive adverb, we also need to use a comma. Let's find the conjunctive adverbs again. However, consequently. The fans stayed, comma, and the game continued, however. Doris entered the room, comma, and consequently, comma, Bob left. Review the sentence. You'll notice that there are many different types of sentences. There are compound sentences, complex sentences. The following is a simple sentence made up of one clause, or one sentence. A sentence contains a subject and a verb, and sometimes an object or more than one object, but not always. The elderly man who lives near me is reading an old Greek literature book. In its simplest form, or pared down using pronouns, the sentence reads, he is reading it. Again, the sentence has a subject, a verb, and in this case, an object. Let's consider some other types of sentences. Complex sentences, for example, are made up of an independent clause and a subordinate clause. Some complex sentences have more than one of either and can be a combination of compound and complex. If this is confusing to you, don't worry. Now we're going to look at a few examples and explain everything. Subordinating conjunctions. We need to use subordinating conjunctions to link clauses together. Consider the first sentence. Number 1, he'll sing until his voice is hoarse. Until his voice is hoarse, in yellow, is the subordinate clause. It can't stand on its own. You can't have a sentence that states, until his voice is hoarse, period. He'll sing until his voice is hoarse. Consider another example. Number 2, he's late because his car broke down. You can't have a sentence that reads, because his car broke down. It's considered incomplete or fragmented. He's late because his car broke down. And number 3, he loves the Yorkshire Dales even though it rains there often. The part, even though it rains there often, cannot stand on its own. The subordinating conjunctions used here are until, because, and even though. The subordinate or dependent clause is until his voice is hoarse, because his car broke down. In sentence 1, he'll sing is the independent or main clause. That part of the sentence can stand on its own. In number 2, he's late. And number 3, he loves the Yorkshire Dales. We can also invert the clauses. Notice what happens with the comma. Number 1, until his voice is hoarse, he'll sing. Until his voice is hoarse is still dependent. Number 2, because his car broke down, he's late. You'll notice that we've started the sentence with because. You can do this as long as you have the independent or main clause in the same sentence. When you invert the clauses, you have to use the comma. Look at number 3. Try to do it in your mind first before I read the sentence. The sentence you come up with should look like this. Even though it rains there often, he loves the Yorkshire Dales. Or even though it rains in the Yorkshire Dales often, he loves it. Remember to use commas when the clauses are inverted. Let's have a look at some subordinating conjunctions. Conjunctions can express meanings such as cause and effect, conditions or comparisons, or they can be temporal and answer the question when or where. Review. Sentence patterns. Sentence variation is part of good writing. Writing that lacks sentence variation and complexity is unclear writing because it makes the reader wonder what the connection is between the sentences. Therefore, point form writing simply will not work for an academic essay, reflection, or long answer question on a test. Let us review the 4 sentence patterns, and let's also pay attention to the conjunctions used within them. A simple sentence is one which is made up of one independent clause. A clause has one subject and one verb. Number 1. Every year, Susan takes a trip to the mountains. As you remember, the expression every year isn't a sentence. It's just an adverbial expression that gives us more information about the timing of the action. Number 2. Susan takes a trip to the mountains every year. If you notice in sentence 2 that adverbial expression, when tacked onto the end, doesn't require the comma. A compound sentence is made up of 2 or more independent clauses and a coordinating conjunction or a semicolon. Example 3. Susan loves her trips to the mountains, but she does not get to go there very often. Number 4. Susan loves her trips to the mountains. She does not get to go very often. A complex sentence contains one main clause and one or more subordinate clauses. Example 1. Susan loves her trips to the mountains because she loves the mountain air and can forage for mushrooms. She loves the mountain air is one subordinate clause, and can forage for mushrooms is the second subordinate clause. Number 2. Susan loves her trips to the mountains since she loves hiking, foraging for mushrooms, and yodeling into the valley. In example number 2, there are 3 subordinate clauses. She loves hiking, she loves foraging for mushrooms, and she loves yodeling into the valley. Some of this information is implicit in the sentence, meaning that it's not explicitly stated, it isn't written out, but our minds understand it. Let's map out the coordination and subordination in the sentences. Complex sentence, one main clause and one or more subordinate clauses. Susan loves her trips to the mountains is the first level of the sentence. This is the main clause or dependent clause. This is the part of the sentence that can stand on its own. Susan loves her trips to the mountains. We could end the sentence here with a period and it would be grammatically correct. If we want to add more information, in this case causal information, why does she love her trips to the mountains? We could respond with, she loves her trips to the mountains because she loves the mountain air and she can forage for mushrooms. The independent and main clause can stand on its own, but because she loves the mountain air and because she can forage for mushrooms are the subordinate or dependent clauses. Again, the sentence that this diagram comes from is, Susan loves her trips to the mountains because she loves the mountain air and can forage for mushrooms. Let's take a look at another example. Susan loves her trips to the mountains. Dependent clause or main clause. And now there's more information. Since, or because, this is causal as well, she loves hiking, foraging for mushrooms, and yodeling into the valley. So remember, the independent or dependent clause is that which can stand on its own. Susan loves her trips to the mountains. And the subordinate or dependent clauses are those which cannot stand on their own. Since she loves hiking, foraging for mushrooms, yodeling into the valley. So the sentence, Susan loves her trips to the mountains since she loves hiking, foraging for mushrooms, and yodeling into the valley, contains one independent or main clause and 3 subordinate or dependent clauses. Compound complex sentences have two main clauses joined by coordinating conjunction or semicolon plus at least one subordinate clause. Example 1. Susan loves her trips to the mountains, but she does not get to go very often because her job keeps her very busy and she does not have much time. We can vary sentence 1 with sentence 2, where we give a little bit more of an explanation as to why she doesn't have much time. Consider this sentence. Susan loves her trips to the mountains, but she does not get to go very often because she does not have much time since her job keeps her very busy. What we've done here is we've taken the subordinate clause and embedded yet another subordinate clause within it. Let's take a look at how this maps out. First, we'll look at sentence number 1. So Susan loves her trips to the mountains, independent or main clause, coordinating conjunction but she does not go very often, or but Susan does not go very often. On the second level, we have because, which is causal. Her job keeps her very busy, and coordinating conjunction, she does not have much time. We can draw the conclusion that because her job keeps her busy, she does not have much time, but we're not really saying that in the sentence. What we're saying is Susan loves her trips to the mountains, but she does not get to go there very often because her job keeps her very busy and she does not have much time. We may draw the conclusion that it's the job that keeps her busy and that's the reason she doesn't have much time. However, we can be more specific. So just to review, independent or main clause in green and subordinate clauses in red. We're going to add yet another level to this, a third level, in the next sentence. So in this sentence we say, Susan loves her trips to the mountains, but Susan does not go very often because she does not have time since her job keeps her very busy. Let's take a look at the different levels here again. The independent or main clause, there are two of them, joined by the coordinating conjunction but. Then we have another conjunction, subordinating, because, causal. She does not have much time, subordinate or dependent clause. And then we have yet another subordinate or dependent clause. Clause 3 is dependent upon clause 2. Clause 2 depends upon clause 1. Clause 1 is dependent. Again, the sentence is, Susan loves her trips to the mountains, but she does not get to go very often because she does not have much time since her job keeps her very busy. Review activities. Don't forget to work on the weekly worksheet provided on Avenue to Learn. Work through the activities either on your own or preferably with a peer or group of peers online. After attempting the work, you should bring your questions about this task to our weekly office review hour. Next week, we'll be looking at common sentence problems, participial phrases and use of gerunds, use of commas again and the em dash, sentence length, and relative clauses. See you next